Please welcome the writer-director of Paddington, Paul King, and the star of Paddington, Hugh Bonneville. Gents, welcome. How are you?
Very well, thank you.
Good, good, good. The movie opens today, so when Raiders of the Lost Ark opened, George Lucas and Steven Spielberg took themselves away to a beach to avoid opening weekend. Clearly, you haven't done that.
We came to the Apple Store, so
You came to the Apple Store.
Maybe they were already slightly further advanced in their careers than I am in mine. But I think Spielberg now does his mix from the yacht.
Oh, really?
Which is an amazing thing. He has a hookup. That's probably
on his yacht.
Very secret material.
You've got a canoe, haven't you?
Yeah, I've got a bath.
So have you popped into cinemas today to see how people are reacting to the film?
No, I can't think of anything more terrifying but than going to an Odeon for an 11 o'clock, 4 people. But no, but I hope people like it.
Oh, they will, they will. So let's go back to the very, very beginning. So did you grow up with Paddington, both of you? Did you grow up in a way with these books and with this
I
character?
did, yes, very much so. He was in the fabric of my childhood. The very first book I remember looking at the pictures while Mum and Dad, read the stories to me, and then he was part of my the first reading that I was able to do for myself. So it's very important, yeah.
Yeah, well, I sort of knew the stop frame animations was what I encountered first, which were really beautiful and really stayed with me and funny and sweet. And then I discovered the books later. Mm-hmm. But the character really stayed with me much more than other things from that time, I think. So, yeah, it was good. It was great when I heard they were making the film, or that David Heyman, our producer, had got the rights to make the film, because it felt like Paddington's, I don't know, somehow as a character he's got some sort of depth and a bit of story and a bit more kind of scale to his narrative than some of those sort of beloved children's icons. So I sort of thought, I could see how there could be a film in there in a way that there might not be in some other things.
So you pursued it, and this is what, 5 years ago when you first became involved with the film?
Yeah, I think it's nearly six.
Nearly six
now, which is too long to make a film, but it just takes a long time to get the script right. And one of the things that David said, because he'd made all the Harry Potter films and Gravity and has no real career pressure, I think he's pretty much fine. And so sort of he on day one just sort of said, well, we'll write a script, and if it's right, then we'll try to make the film. But there was no sort of sense of an end product that had to be got to a market by a certain amount of time.
Yeah.
There was just no pressure to do that. So in a way, the work expands to fill the time available, but also you are sort of trying to do something with a character that people hold dear from their childhoods and sort of have strong feelings about, and that we really wanted to do something good with, and we wanted Michael Bond, who wrote the books, to be proud of, and we wanted to get the right cast, and we took our time, and it was a great lesson in how to make a film.
Absolutely. And speaking of right cast, Mr. Bonneville here, you play Mr. Brown. Can you tell us about Mr. Brown?
Well, Mr. Brown is what can only be described as risk-averse. When we first meet him, his role in life is, I think in the original stories he's described as someone who works in the city, but it's not actually specified. So Paul had come up with this idea of him being very, very risk-averse and in fact reluctant to look after this bear, contrary to the label that's around Paddington's neck. And so in a way, he goes on quite a big journey in character terms, which isn't there in the original story. In the original story, the Browns just accept the bear very willingly, whereas in terms of a sort of 90-minute feature, you want to have a bit more of an arc. So he goes from being, if not curmudgeonly, then certainly cautious and sceptical to a bit of a... He releases his inner bear by the end.
No spoilers, but yeah, that's what happens. How did you become involved, and at what point did you become involved?
It was about 2 years ago, I think. It was a spring... about roughly 2 years ago. And it all looked doom and gloom because I was involved in Downton Abbey, and I think you were quite ready to you'd been waiting 4 years by that stage, and wanted to get on with it. But there was a sort of nice compromise in the end. You went and shot in Costa Rica, and then things paused for a while until I'd finished Downton, and then we were able to kick off.
Oh wow, fantastic! So was it the role itself that appealed, or was it the fact that it was Paddington, this thing that you grew up with?
I think three elements. The name Paddington, the name David Heyman, and then Paul's script. They all sort of converged, and then I remember sitting outside David's office the first time we met, and I realised that the real Paddington bear was sitting next to me. You're so bored of that comment, aren't you?
I can only interpret it as a comment about my weight. We have nothing else in common.
No, I defy that because, and this is a sort of note for all film directors, on any film set there are 100 catastrophes every day just lurking around the corner, and they faced us, and Paul in particular, on this project, and each time he was able to reset the dial to positive, just like Paddington does, and that's a rare and enviable quality.
Or cause an endless series of catastrophes, one way or the other.
Is it difficult to keep your head when catastrophes are happening on set? How do you manage it?
I don't.
You just panic and freak out.
It's a very odd, very stressful experience because you've got this big sort of machine to make a big film with a very large budget by anything I'm used to, and but it's like being on a clock. It's like an episode of 24. Every hour there are 4 or 5 things that you just have to hit, otherwise the bomb's going to go off and you're not going to complete the day and the scene's not going to be the thing, and so it's relentlessly stressful, but we just about managed to get through it. And then the bits that I'd messed up, fortunately, the very generous people at Studio Canal let me film some extra bits at the end to make up for my incompetence the first time around.
So I've heard this comparison, you and Paddington, before, not just from you, but I don't see a red hat, a blue duffel coat, or a predilection for marmalade, unless you do have one in your hiding from us.
Very hairy.
Very, very hairy. Can you yourself comment on this? Do you see where this is coming from, why people compare you to a bear that's 3 foot 6 inches tall?
I really think it's just food. It's food related. If there's a plate of sandwiches, mother didn't raise a lever, so I have to clean it. It's terrible. If I'm ever in having dinner with my wife, even at home, and there's stuff left on the plate, I literally can't help myself, even cold chips. So I think it's really sort of just compulsive eating. But, I hope I've got some of his finer qualities too.
Yeah.
But I can't think what they might be.
Hugh, I want to dig into this a little bit deeper now. So
yeah, let's go right into
let's do it. Forget the Pauls here. What's Paddington-esque about him?
Well, apart from as I say, resetting the dial to positive whenever catastrophe is around the corner, also his way of dealing with things that aren't going well. I remember, in fact, that bathtub coming down the stairs, which many people might think is CGI, is actually real. And I remember Paul, it took weeks, didn't it, to get that effect right. Yes. And he would develop the hard stare, which Paddington is well known for, with the effects team who were building that water tank, getting it ready for the big gush. And each time he'd come back and with this sort of slightly furrowed brow and said, "They haven't got it right yet, and I'm trying to get cross. And I'm going to have to get cross, and it doesn't suit me." But we got there in the end.
We did.
Did he not recruit you? Do you have a hard stare?
I've been practicing it. That was the weird thing, actually, in the movie, because...
You've got a cuddly stare, and that's it.
No, but when there's a little bit in the film where Paddington does reveal to me his hard stare, and, of course, the bear wasn't there on that day, and so Paul did it instead. And so seeing it for real when the bear finally showed me on screen was quite revealing. It was very like Paul doing it.
Oh, really? I can't imagine you, Paul, having a hard stare.
No. And you're not ever going to be able to imagine that.
I was trying to subtly tee it up
I know,
there, but you avoided it.
The subliminal work there was extraordinary.
Okay. Just going back to the story of the film, but how closely does it cleave to the books?
Pretty well, I think, given the books are, after the first 4 or 5 chapters, essentially a series of short stories. So while we sort of cheerfully raid them, there's not like long movie-sized narratives in there. But what we use is the first 4 or 5 chapters. I'm going to get my numbers wrong here now, but which really we meet Paddington at Paddington Station. There's the scene in the tea room. The Browns take him home in a taxi. He goes and has a bath. He goes on the underground the next day. And they're sort of probably the most sort of famous Paddington set pieces. Certainly, they're the ones I remembered from the animations. And it's the only real bit of continuous narrative in the books. And then there's a kind of sentence at the start of the 5th chapter which says words to the effect of, within a few weeks, Paddington was quite at home in the Brown household. And I thought, well, there's space there for a story, because he started as this sort of slightly scruffy, urchin-y, wild animal that's been invited into a household who are very kind to him, but sort of a little reluctant and a little sort of taken aback by who he is. And I thought, how do you go from outsider to insider? And for me, I was thinking about one of my all-time favourite films, The Kid, the Charlie Chaplin film, and how he is such a great character. Both are great characters, but Charlie Chaplin's character is the little tramp who finds an orphan baby and absolutely doesn't want to take him in, thinks about putting him down the drain, tries to palm him off on anyone else. It's really funny and silly, and then slowly by the end of the film he's totally fallen in love with this character, and you just can't watch that film without laughing a lot and bursting into tears, or at least I can't. And I thought, well, there's a great journey there for Hugh's character, and I knew Hugh's work, not just Downton but all of his comedy work, which is so utterly brilliant. And I thought he's become very famous for the non-comedy work, but it'd be lovely to see a role where you could combine all the different aspects of your character and of your skill set. And we really built the journey of the film around Hugh, because he's sort of a character who changes, but he's also sort of an innocent. He's not going on a great big Hollywood journey. He's really a character who changes the people around him. He's much more that sort of a figure.
Fantastic. We do have a clip now. It's the, as you mentioned, a scene at Paddington where the Browns meet Paddington for the first time. Let's take a look. Paul, what would you have done if Paddington Station had said no?
I guess Marylebone was always the backup. It would have been awful. I don't know. And there was a terrible thing. One of the we wanted to wait for Hugh because I've expressed my love to him publicly now, I think the nation will agree, hopefully. But Paddington are having some painting work done, and they were going to cover the whole thing in scaffolding. And while that is quite London, we're all used to kind of rail terminuses covered in scaffolding, it wouldn't have quite suited the sort of storybook heightened sense. So there was a thing of Hugh's availability and the scaffolding coming in, and about every week we had updates. But fortunately, Network Rail are delayed endlessly. And they tried incredibly hard to fit us in. That was a mean crack about people who were very, very helpful, actually. And they diverted about 3/4 of the trains in Britain to let us film on this platform and worked incredibly hard. And it took a year to plan.
Wow.
It's just all very complicated. But I do think Paddington opens doors. Like, people wanted to help because it was Paddington, and I suppose the station especially, because it's, something that's dear to their hearts. But they don't let you just do this sort of thing. David, who made Harry Potter, was filming at King's Cross, and they never let him have cranes in there and closed platforms and do all this sort of thing. And you go, well, Harry Potter's a big project. It was done out of the goodness of their hearts, and it's a really lovely thing that the character brings out people's helpful, charming side.
And Hugh, was that a special moment then, filming that scene?
That was several nights, wasn't it, as I remember? And I think on each occasion we had a half-hour window where they literally would close one platform, the platform that you see there. But otherwise it was a working station, so it's a miracle of sound dubbing and clever camera angles to make it look like it was a fairly calm station and there weren't trains coming in and out all the time.
I love that Mr. Brown's first reaction to Paddington is not, oh, it's a bear, it's a talking bear, it's stranger danger. It's a very modern Londoner, isn't he?
An immediate fear that he's going to be sold something, which is Londoner's greatest fear. Walking to, what does that person want? Bet there. God, no, I haven't got any. Sorry, I left my wallet at home. That seems to me the spirit of contemporary London.
That's right. And also, there's another scene a little later when Paddington first goes on the tube, and Mr. Brown warns him that on every platform there are pickpockets,
thieves, murderers,
and pickpockets. Which is a gross exaggeration, obviously. Speaking on behalf of Tourist London, visit London.
There are some pickpockets. That's it.
So no, he's very cautious, as I say. But luckily, others in the film have a more open heart early on.
Absolutely. We don't have a clip of this, but if you haven't seen the film, at one point Hugh wears a dress. He dons drag at one point. We won't say why, but what was that experience like for you?
Well, as Mr. Brown says, quite liberating, actually.
I like the way that not saying why is the spoiler thing. I'll tell you what happens. I just won't explain the plot that leads up to it.
It's a very, very good point, but yeah.
No, it was not. And anyway, it's more of a house coat rather than a dress. At one point, it was a big floral dress. Do you remember? Lindy Hemming, who's our brilliant costume designer, had come up with a wonderful sort of Bo Peep look for me for this particular section of the film, which I didn't think it was quite appropriate. So we whittled it down and a
bit more tabardy, isn't it?
Yes, it's more of a cleaning lady's tabard and cardi.
And
it's a very fetching look.
Hugh is entirely method at this moment. Most of the costume he didn't really seem to care that much about. about what he wore, but for this particular scene, there was a good 2 or 3 hours of prep, and every single element had to be justified from what was on the cleaning trolley that we had. So
I was adamant because at one point Lindy said, "What about these high heels? They'd look funny." And I said, "I don't believe a cleaner would have left high heels on the trolley. A pair of Crocs, maybe." So we developed this, and also even down to the eyeshadow is I made the props department go out and get some floor polish, so that there was a top shot which actually was cut of showing all these materials in the cleaner's trolley. So my gorgeous brown eyeshadow is meant to be floor polish.
And your voluptuous chest is
2 floor mops. Yeah.
And not to give too much away, because I think I've given the end of the movie away. I might as well at some point. But in that scene, you have a Welsh accent. Where did that come from?
Well, Paul had written this very funny scene for myself and Simon Farnaby, and I couldn't. I don't know. We were just improvising around it, and mucking about with it, and we were discussing how good an actor would Mr. Brown be. You know, how convincing, and maybe he had a cod character that he'd done at Christmas parties. You know, playing charades or something. So out popped Myfanwy with her rather sort of stretched Welsh tones.
I really hope this was based on an old teacher or something that was going to be.
I don't know where it came from. I don't know where it came from.
Wales?
Roughly. A lot of Welsh people would disagree.
We have another clip now. This is another scene set at Paddington, and involves Mr. Brown talking to Paddington in the tea room. Let's take a look. Hugh, when the late great Bob Hoskins was making Who Framed Roger Rabbit, it was a very different technique back then, of course, I guess. But he used to complain that he went home on the weekends and started hallucinating. He started seeing weasels and rabbits everywhere he went. Did you take Paddington home with you, literally, at times?
No. I was lucky enough not to have to do that, but. It was quite strange, but it's a strange thing to say, really, that he did become rather real to all of us, because we had seen three-dimensional references. Each time a shot was completed, the digital effects team would come in with this furry head and capture the image and the lighting angles and everything else. And also, like in that scene particularly, we had Gus Brown providing a sort of vocal reference off camera, and also Javier Marzan, who sort of with Paul particularly. I mean, they did it separately, but improvised the sort of scrapes that Paddington gets into. Okay. So he'd be squashed into the chair opposite me.
So you never had that eye line problem where you're looking here and Paddington's there?
Well, also we had a stick that was the right height, and we had Lauren who would wear Paddington's hat and walk through shots with us. So we had a combination of methods of making the bear as real as possible, even though it wasn't there at all. I actually wanted to... Do you mind if I interrupt? I wanted to ask you something. The inspiration for the tea room, I mean, that tea room isn't at Paddington Station, it's a completely sort of invented one, but was that sort of brief encounter-ish and... that sort of thing?
I think that's what buffets legally have to look like. Otherwise, the BBFC would probably ban the film, I would imagine, if that was... I don't know, it's described as a buffet in the book, and you don't really sort of have buffets anymore, but I suppose we were trying to make a London that felt... The books are always sort of set in the year they're written, but there's a sort of timeless, sort of slight old-fashionedness about it, and I suppose I thought that just having it in a Starbucks or something would be, I don't know, I just wouldn't feel right. It didn't feel like the sort of London we wanted to set the film in, so we made a lovely tea room.
So you spent 5 years on it. You went through many iterations of the script. At any point did you set it in the 50s or 60s in the era when it was first created?
No. I think we were different. We were different sort of levels of timelessness, I suppose. At one, we sort of. I sort of started out wanting to be quite rigid and really wanting it to be able to be, like, appear to be contemporary, but everything in it be completely believable for audiences who'd read it in 1958. So because there's so much retro, sort of people, half the people you see in London look like they're from the 50s anyway, and sort of, so all the sort of Cath Kidston stuff, I suppose, and the kind of hipster facial hairstyling and stuff. So it's quite a 50s-y retro time we're living in. So it sort of felt like that'd be possible, but then I felt like I just wanted to open it up a bit and be able to have some tower blocks and some, I sort of started falling in love with other bits and pieces and really wanted to have Trellick Tower in it, for example, and it just ended up a little bit more heightened storybook London. I suppose I was looking at that book that I'm going to get his name wrong, but the Hungarian artist who wrote This Is London, you know, that sort of book, which is sort of Victorian but sort of 50s and sort of contemporary, and it felt like, oh, I think London's quite robust and quite a sort of time travel-y city anyway, so it can take that kind of treatment. I did this a lot, but it doesn't really convey much, did it?
It's all good. Because the movie is, in many ways, it's a love letter to London, to this idea of this cultural melting pot where anybody can fit in.
I thought it was like a Dear John.
Yeah, a little bit.
No, well, I think London's... I mean, I'm not from London, and a lot of Londoners aren't from London, and I think in common with, I'm sure, many big cities, it's a place where you can come from almost anywhere around Britain or around the world, but very quickly become a Londoner, and it's a nice thing to be, which is non-nation specific. So Paddington feels like one of our great Londoners, but of course he's from the depths of the Amazon rainforest, and I think that's what's rather lovely about it, in the sense that Clive James said something many years ago which stayed with me in his postcard from London. He did that series where he goes, you walk down Oxford Street and everyone's a weirdo, and that's what's nice about it, that if you're normal, you stick out like a sore thumb. It's a kind of city full of eccentrics, and that's what I sort of think London can be, and it's a rather lovely thing to capture on film, or try to.
It's a lovely film. I mean, Hugh, did that appeal to you as well? That sort of sense of it being a love letter to a city, it being about more than just a bear that comes looking for a home.
Absolutely, and you think back to when Michael Bond first created the character, you know, only a decade or so after a little bit more than that, after the evacuees were on the platforms of stations all over Britain with their gas masks and as it were, their labels saying, please look after me. The Windrush immigrants settling in that part of London for the first time. And Mr. Gruber himself talking about how he'd travelled across Europe to escape from troubles in his country. So you've got this sense of people being not in their natural environment, having to move, having to establish new routes and find new homes. And that's really the heart of what Paddington is about, is looking for acceptance.
We have time for one last clip now, and then we'll take some questions from you guys. This is quite a long one, but at this point, Paddington's been brought back to the Browns' home, and he goes to the bathroom. Havoc ensues. Not a spoiler. Let's take a look. Hugh, you got seriously soaked there from the looks of things.
Yes, and as I was referring to earlier, that it took many weeks for the water tank effect to be at to the maestro's satisfaction, but it was quite epic when it did happen.
It is fantastic. If you have any questions now for Paul and Hugh, please put your hands up. Yes, please, lady in the front row. We have a microphone going here. Thank you.
This is a question for Hugh Bonneville. What was the most challenging part about filming Paddington?
I think, well, I've made lots of comments in the past about how it was actually the bear himself, because he was such a huge ego and a monstrous diva and wouldn't come out of his trailer until he'd had 4 jars. But I think in reality it's the fact that he wasn't there. That was probably the hardest thing. But luckily we did have the luxury of, which is rare in TV and film projects, of proper rehearsal. And Paul was it was just a very exciting period, because Paul is not overly precious about his material. He knows what he wants to achieve, but also invites collaboration from all the departments. And so we were able to improvise and fine-tune and discover character relationships and all that sort of thing. And so while the bear not being there was both the biggest challenge and actually the most exciting thing to have discovered in rehearsal.
In fact, Paul told me in a previous interview that your work and your improvisation with Sally Hawkins really changed and affected the way that Mr. and Mrs. Brown behaved in the film. It
did, because we went down a few blind alleys, because Paul quite rightly had said it would be more interesting if there was a sense of fracture in their relationship, even if they're not aware of it at the beginning of the story, so that there is a trajectory through the story, and the presence of the bear finally brings this family into a harmony that they perhaps weren't in at the beginning. It makes it more interesting. So we, of course, went down the sort of Wars of the Roses route and started doing these vicious improvisations where we slagged each other off and all that. And Paul kept saying, that's not quite what I meant. What I meant was, and we went round and round the houses, me and Sally going, but we're arguing, we're having a fractured relationship. That's what you asked for. And then actually he gave us a really simple and sweet idea. He said, watch, what's it called? Manhattan Murder Mystery, the Woody Allen film. And so Sally and I both went and watched that one weekend and came back, and actually it's all about, it's all about tone, and that's what I think Paul's captured so wonderfully, is tone. And so when you see that movie, you see that this is a couple who, perfectly adore each other. They're just on slightly different tracks. They're not throwing axes at each other. And that was a really good way in. And so then we were able to find a way of working on the relationship that was endearing but sort of slightly off kilter. And then ultimately that's what Paddington finds a way of solving.
Fantastic. Any questions now for Paul or Hugh? Or Paul and Hugh? Or Hugh and Paul? Yeah, anything? Yes, please, right here.
Paul, a lot of your previous work has been sort of much more surreal and adult-orientated in terms of humour, so how was it to work on something much more sort of for the family? How did that differ for you?
Well, I think I've done quite a lot of talking animals in my limited career, but I made a TV show called The Mighty Boosh, which I guess is what you're referring to, which is very... is quite out there, although not having seen Noel Fielding's follow-up show remotely as out there as it could have been. They are two people with amazing imaginations. It felt, I suppose because I was writing this and I never wrote that, it didn't feel like such a sort of gear change, and it felt there was a lot of source material to work from, and there were some really clear references in my head from very early on of, Chaplin, I suppose, and some other people. And it just felt like a really good fit, in a way, for the things I was interested in doing visually and the sort of humour that I like doing, And a lot of the people I've worked with before are physical. This is one of the people who helped with the physical comedy side of things. Cal McChrystal actually directed the first Mighty Boosh live show and the third one as well, and taught me how to direct. So it's all sort of within a family. But I think a bear in a red hat and double coat is quite surreal enough for a mainstream family comedy.
Some of the fictional children's characters have found places in theme parks, like Harry Potter at Universal Studios and at Leavesden. Can you see a role like that for Paddington?
Yeah, I suppose so. I'm not sure what it would be, but...
the bath going down the stairs?
The bath. That's like a flume, right, I guess?
That's pretty much
it. Sort of feels he belongs more in kind of Fortnum and Mason's than a kind of an adventure park, but I'm sure it sounds fun, yeah.
Hugh, if there were a Paddington log flume at a theme park, would you be available 12 times a day to be soaked by it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think it's a must for every young dad.
Has anybody approached you about taking Paddington into that kind of environment?
Not me, but I wouldn't be the person to be approached. I'm about 105 on the power list of that character.
Well, you never know. The other thing is, will you do any more? Will there be Paddington 2, Paddington 3?
Well, it's out today, without wishing to sound too pluggy, in cinemas, and if enough people go, we would love to do more. I mean, the books, it's a long series. It's not like he doesn't die at the end. See, that's not a spoiler. So there's absolutely every opportunity, and we'd love to do it, but it really depends on how it goes. It's an expensive thing to get off the ground, and while Paddington's very familiar in Britain and some other countries around the world, he's not an international phenomenon like Harry Potter was, where you go, unless they really mess this up, I think they'll at least get to number 2. So we'll have to see.
And Hugh, would you be available for that if it happened?
Everyone has a price.
Any last questions? Yes, please, right here at the very, very back.
2 questions, both quite short. The scene where Paddington's sticking his head down the loo, for want of a better phrase, is that a spaniel's face that's in water? Because it looks so much like my uncle's dog.
It's we've actually broken into your uncle's house, and no, it's the extraordinary CG work that Framestore have done. I think what's really nice about this film is it's got like Framestore do it all, who are just up the road in Wells Street, and they're genuinely world leaders in what they do, and it's just so good. No one's done that, and you go, that shot is a world first, groundbreaking, extraordinary piece of CG. But what's nice about it is it's not in kind of massive slow-mo bullet time with somebody kind of taking multiple hits to the face. It's a bear putting his head in the loo. And I really like how sort of silly it is for something that is extraordinary work, and it's sort of thrown away, but hopefully it feels fun and funny, and we get to do things that you couldn't have done with a character even a couple of years ago. So it's great.
Am I right in thinking that that was one of the first bits of the film to be finished rendered?
Yeah, the bathroom was
Yeah.
the first sequence we did, yes.
And that shot, that was the first clip I saw in the process, and that I found it astonishing. I still do, just seeing it just then. It's so real and does look exactly like your uncle's dog.
Yeah. It's one of those things, if you watch it on a loop, like when we're watching, like trying to do all these shots, because they're all, it's sort of, it breaks my heart slightly. There's a sort of sense that because this stuff is done in computers, it's somehow done by magic, and you know, computers aren't elves. They kind of require operators, and that shot, the first one with the toothbrushes where he's doing that, just to get all of the performance and everything right, because it's quite a long shot, and every single eyebrow raise and little look to the side, and they're all really important. I think that's version 459, that shot. Wow. They are every single day looking at new versions and new changes. How does the fur move? How does the fur move underwater? Does it float, or is it a bit faster? Are there bubbles coming out of his mouth or just his nose? If they come out of his nose, do they cover the eyes? Can you see the eyes? Should the eyes be bloodshot? Should we be pulling back? Do you get enough of a sense of him pulling back? And each of those takes 24 hours to answer, because trying a thing out, you know, it's not like with an actor. With Hugh, we can rehearse a scene 50 times in an hour. That's 50 days in visual effects. And it's so labour intensive and so lovingly crafted. And I just want to sort of just say that, because Framestore are amazing and there's so much love that's gone into it. It's just bafflingly brilliant. But if you watch it on a loop, you start going, what amazing visual effects. And you watch it in a sequence, hopefully, and you're 6 years old or 66 years old, you're just laughing because Paddington put his head in the toilet.
And the second part of the question was?
Before I go on, I'd just say you did really well making it look like my uncle's house when he opened the door and all the water flooded out. It's quite a familiar setting. But the second question was, where can I pick up one of those dashing red hats before it ends up in Shoreditch High Street?
My wife makes those hats. She's a hat maker. Best question of all time. Oh my goodness. Do I know you? She is an amazing hat maker. Her company is called Moody and Farrell. She made the most beautiful hat, made about 20 of them for the various reasons we needed, and I'm sure they're available at very reasonable price in time for Christmas.
Hugh, do you have anything to plug? Any marmalade lines you've got coming out?
No, only that I can endorse the quality of Eloise's work, because she fixed my trilby. So, no, fabulous.
Fantastic. And it's a lovely note on which to end. Paddington's out today. I urge you strongly to go and see it. It's a beautiful, beautiful film. Thank you so much. Paul King, Hugh Bonneville, thank you. Thank you.